The kingdom of Fireloom is in an ailing state, ruled by Silk and by Song. For whatever reason, tensions have been high in the kingdom, and whatever has been building up in Fireloom looks like it's finally coming to a head. We're hearing of those becoming masters of a stage, or chosen by a voice. We aren't really given a lot of context for what these elements mean or what they are, but all the characters that we've seen so far that reference it have made it sound pretty important. There's Seth, one of the game's newly introduced characters that seems to know quite a lot about the voice, saying that it's chosen him for something, which might explain his greatly enhanced strength and agility. When characters mention the voice and the stage, they're usually spoken of as though they're higher powers of some sort. If that's the case, then it does kind of make sense why Fireloom is such a popular destination for pilgrimage. If the voice is capable of granting such power to anyone it chooses, then I'd imagine there to be lots of others in search of it, to see if they too are worthy of being chosen. Fireloom seems very centered around its faith, and I feel like this might be a pretty big reason for that. But, of course, where there's faith, there tends to be heretics and detractors not far behind it. I've decided to go in the order of which the characters were chronologically teased to prevent any confusion, starting from Leth's earliest tease, an old Huntress named the Huntress. She seems to know quite a bit about the waning state of Fireloom. She sits far below the Citadel, waiting for her children and nurturing a distaste of the Citadel above, and all of the hapless pilgrims making their ascent towards it. She greets Hornet, claiming her scent is strange, yet somehow familiar. She asks Hornet if she happens to, by chance, have any organs on her at the moment, and then asks if she's willing to donate her body as a feast for her children instead. It's a pretty interesting way to start a conversation. The reward for solving this riddle was a short gif of Hornet approaching the Huntress, sitting idly on a mound of what appears to be eggs or cocoons of some sort. The gif lasts no more than a couple seconds, but there is quite a bit we can begin analyzing from this tease, namely the background of the area itself. The room appears to be some kind of nesting ground. The small mound of eggs the Huntress is sitting on all look to have a gilded pattern on the surface, and I'm not sure if this detail is too significant, especially considering the rest of the eggs we see in the background don't have this pattern. A few of them almost sort of look like lifeblood cocoons, how some of them are wrapped and hanging from the ceiling by this strange-looking vine with butterflies or possibly lumaflies gathering around them. It's pretty apparent that these objects in the room are eggs of some sort, which are likely the children the Huntress is waiting for. The Huntress also has a very negative opinion of the Citadel at the peak of the city, and we aren't really given anything on why that is. We do know the Kingdom of Fireloom is pretty thickly rooted in religion and faith, seeing that the Citadel serves as a sort of holy ground and a destination for pilgrimage. Even the rosaries, the kingdom's currency, are described as holy beads. She describes the pilgrims seeking the Citadel as hapless, and I think the way the description uses the word hapless here could be kind of important. The Huntress is implying the pilgrims are unfortunate and unlucky or misguided, possibly because she has reason to think Fireloom's faith isn't as holy as outsiders may perceive it. This makes me think that there are plenty of those in Lower Fireloom, including the Huntress, that were either turned away from the Citadel for reasons having to do with their faith, or they just outright don't accept the faith Fireloom preaches. There's not much to base that off of, but with Fireloom being a sort of holy destination and all, I feel like it's natural to assume that someone so openly disliking the Citadel could be explained by one's rejection of the kingdom's faith. I wonder how many other characters we'll run into with this kind of disdain for the Citadel. But even though Farloom is a kingdom of faith and pilgrimage, not everyone in Farloom seems to follow its rules, and Grindel here seems to be after rosaries more than any sort of faith. Grindel was teased following the reveal of the Huntress a week later, with a riddle involving the help of some Hollow Knight-centric creators. Oh, and you should totally follow me on Twitter, by the way. Anyways, Grindel seems less fixated on faith and more on thievery, and although he's seen just about all of the kingdom, he's seen most of it only through iron bars and cages. You can free him by breaking apart his cell door, and he will divulge information and kingdom gossip in exchange for some of your rosaries. With Farloom in the state that it is, I'm sure Grindel will be wanting to take full advantage. It's captioned here that Grindel will give to you snippets of information for a price, but whether or not such information is actually valuable kinda seems to be up in the air. Again, I don't have too much to base this off of, but it certainly does look like an interaction that can be skipped. Breaking down the cell door to free Grindel definitely sort of looks like an encounter that you are allowed to bypass or possibly come back to later on. Somewhat related to the quest of saving Zote in Hollow Knight and having him wind up at the Colosseum if you so choose. So because of this, I can't imagine any of Grindel's dialogue revealing anything too important, but I'm not gonna say this game hasn't surprised me before. I'm also not sure why there's a workbench with the same throwing pins that Hornet uses right above Grindel's cell, but that was another thing I had pointed out to me. It does look like there's something glowing just below it that can be picked up, so perhaps this is where Hornet first discovers the item. I can definitely see this being a means of guiding you through some of Farloom's biomes. In exchange for rosaries, Grindel may let you in on a secret entrance to another biome, or it might reveal the location of an optional upgrade or another ability. Sort of like how the Elderbug would hint to certain areas being open to you after receiving certain items or killing certain bosses. This would make a little sense considering he has traveled the length of the kingdom, even if most of that time was spent in confinement. Possibly knowledge for side quests that you wouldn't be able to get from the Moss Grotto bounty board or anywhere else. Although not everything Grindel says is apparently supposed to be taken too seriously. So it could just as likely be something completely irrelevant and not worth anything. Like, yes, I see, the floor here is made of floor. Did you know that, Hornet? The third riddle teased the appearance of characters we should already be kind of familiar with. This is the Caravan, a band of traveling fleas that journeyed to Farloom in search of enlightenment. Some of the younger, more playful fleas have been scattered throughout Farloom, and despite the Caravan's preparations for the dangerous roads of Farloom, the kingdom may have been a little more treacherous than they thought. If you remember, Hornet actually freed one of these fleas during gameplay featured on Nintendo's Treehouse, so we can tell by gameplay that, much like the knight saving the grubs of Hollow Nest, it's going to fall on Hornet to come to the rescue of a lot of these younger fleas. According to its description, the Caravan boasts a bountiful, flavorful assortment of food, powerful drinks, and some surprising amenities. This puts me in the mind of the types of rewards you may get from rescuing a set amount of fleas, sort of like how the Grubfather would give you more than just Geo after rescuing an amount of grubs, giving out upgrade materials like Pale Ore or a Mask Shard, and the Caravan is painted up to be this jubilous and carefree bunch. And the game clearly communicates their culture being built around their love for feasting, intoxicating substances, and other things of the like. I'm kinda curious to see what rewards the Caravan could possibly give Hornet for rescuing the rest of their troop. This might be where Silksong's attire comes into play. Do you guys remember seeing this item here on the top left of Silksong's equipment menus and interface? It's Hornet's trademark red cloak, and it looks like it might be selectable or intended to be replaced or exchanged with other outfits and articles of clothing. The powers or benefits these particular articles of clothing have with them, on the other hand, I don't have a lot of predictions for, but I do feel like it would make sense that a stylish outfit of some sort would come as a reward from a traveling caravan, since a lot of its culture is rooted in things like merriment and celebration. Seth is an extremely powerful warrior that stands guard before a long-forgotten secret hidden beneath the citadel. His moveset looks extremely fast and challenging to follow, and it definitely looks like one of the game's more frenetic fights. He puts me in the mind of what Captain America would look like if he were ever a bug in Farloom. With an unwavering devotion, this ancient guardian fights and vanquishes every foe that comes to unearth what lies beyond. And from what we can tell from the background, it looks like he isn't even above vanquishing the Bell cultists. There's this staff with a cultist lying beneath it, and this one in particular doesn't seem to be part of the background. This leads me to believe that this one was killed much more recently, perhaps even as a means of kicking off the boss fight. Maybe we stumble into the base of the Citadel and Seth is already in the process of killing another Wanderer. Seth wields a pin and uses a symbol as a shield. I'm not sure if this means anything, but the pin Seth uses is actually the same type of weapon that Lace fights you with. I wonder if Lace and Seth ever cross paths in the events of the game at some point, or perhaps they might even know of each other. Their fighting styles do look similar enough, so I'm anxious to see any sort of relationship that might develop or have already been developed between the two characters. There's a second GIF that was teased that leads us to believe Seth is also an NPC that you can talk to during your time in the Greymore area, and it's hard to distinguish whether this is before or after your fight with him in the Citadel. This final riddle actually contained 2 passwords instead of 1, the passwords being Protector and Bloom, which might explain the particle effects in the background here. I think a couple people initially interpreted these particles as flakes from the worm in the Kingdom's Edge, or a worm of some sort, but we aren't even that sure where Farloom is in relation to the Kingdom of Hallownest. The password being Bloom might indicate that these are flower petals of some sort, and the base of the Citadel might not be too far away from one of the areas you encounter Lace, as the flower petals are visible here as well. Whether or not they're from the same source, however, is a little harder to answer. His moveset looks badass. It just looks badass. His primary attack looks like this small leap forward to Hornet's position and swiping twice with his pin. And there's another attack where he leaps up into the air and throws his shield downward at you, and then catches it on the bounce back up. The GIF isn't a video file playing at 60 FPS or anything, so it's hard to really get in here and dissect everything we're seeing, but it looks like Seth really is just that nimble of a boss. So this encounter should definitely be a fun one. Come to think of it, a lot of the boss's Hornet faces seem to have a pretty hard emphasis on agility. Lace is almost certainly faster than just about any boss we saw in Hollow Knight. Carmelita looks to be much faster than average despite her size, and if Seth's description is of any testament to how agile the rest of his moveset will be, then it sounds like this boss is about ready to outmaneuver pretty much all of them. And despite Seth's moveset looking badass as all hell, something I did see pointed out in Mossbag's newest analysis video, which you should totally check that out if you haven't, was actually how Hornet dodges this attack. It looks like Hornet is flapping open her cloak in a way that keeps her up in the air, and this might be a cloak-specific upgrade since it is suggested that the cloak can be modified, but it does look a tad too underwhelming to be a core movement ability in my opinion. This is probably something you would use to avoid projectiles instead of reaching ledges and platforming and whatnot. This last character is special for more reasons than one, considering his moveset, his presence in the kingdom, and the mystery behind where he got the powers he did. But perhaps the largest reason is his designer. Seth was a character designed by Seth Goldman, a Hollow Knight fan that actually got the privilege of meeting Team Cherry themselves. And through a collaboration with the Marty Lyons Foundation, Team Cherry worked with Seth on bringing his design to life in Silksong. Seth also made a Reddit post around 3 or so months ago, stating that he had actually seen GIFs of his character in action. Now, if we assume these are the same GIFs that were teased in Leth's final riddle, then being able to assign a date to when these GIFs were created is actually kinda cool. This is hard news to share, but Seth actually passed away during the process of creating the character. But much like the character's devotion to the Citadel, Seth's dedication and love for Hollow Knight has been immortalized in the Kingdom of Farloom, quite literally. Along with the teasing of Silksong's newer faces came some noteworthy details in the game's UI, probably the most obvious one being the supposed malfunction of the UI in the Huntress GIF, where the silk spool is completely charged, yet the spool directly across from your health meter is not. Now, if you remember from Silksong's gameplay demo at Nintendo Treehouse, this spool beside your HP charged up in tandem with topping off the spool below it. I'm not sure why this isn't the case here, but a lot of people have chalked this up to your average UI bug, which isn't too surprising, considering the game is still in development. The UI in Grindel's teaser GIF, however, is a little harder to figure out. There's a small green section of silk here on the end of the meter, and I was just ready to write this off as another glitch, but a couple of people actually pointed out to me that there is an object in Silksong's tool menu that looks like it could be related to it. There's also the Weaver-looking tool right next to it, in addition to the fact that the blue icon on Hornet's crest looks to be some kind of Weaver symbol, only without the trademark 6 eyes, leading to the assumption that a lot of Hornet's silk-related tools will be coming from this section. This UI change I thought was by far the most interesting. When teasing the Caravan of Fleas, the UI seems to have its leftmost mask of health covered or protected by something? It's not immediately obvious what this is supposed to be, but judging by the cracks showing through the shell, it does look like a protection barrier of some kind that can take multiple hits. I'm not completely sure if I'd hang my hat on this explanation though, because if we look at tools and their functions, we already have another tool in our inventory that kind of fulfills this exact purpose, which is the lifeblood syringe here that Hornet injects herself with in the reveal trailer. And I don't feel like it would make much sense mechanically having another tool with this similar of a function. The way the shell cracks looks like it can take damage, leading me to assume it could be a manually triggered protection, sort of like how Baldur Shell worked in Hollow Knight, but that still doesn't really explain why it's covering one of the masks. There's also the possibility that the function of this shell isn't even protective at all. Maybe it's a type of disability mechanic that prevents Hornet from having full HP, and the casing could indicate that the mask it's covering is null and should be ignored. I'm not sure how significant this is, but the physical properties of the shell itself could also mean something. It isn't the same color as the other masks. It looks like it's made of a type of bone or enamel, and it bears a pretty huge resemblance to the headpiece of this little guy right here. The spool meter has also been extended, likely due to an upgrade, and this little notch here that tells us the capacity of what our spool used to be might be a means of just letting us know that healing is still possible once filled to this point. At a glance, there really isn't anything that's too outstanding about the HUD that accompanies the tease of Seth, but I think there's still just a little to analyze here. Do you remember me bringing up the Reddit post that Seth made around 3 months ago that mentioned GIFs of his character? Well, going off the assumption that these are the GIFs that were mentioned, that could mean the GIFs of Seth are a little more dated than some of the others. Of the 4 characters that were teased, the GIFs of Seth are the only GIFs that feature the throwing knife meter to the right of the silk spool. None of the other GIFs have this element in them, and if the GIFs of Seth are actually this old, then it might be worth looking at the final product once the game launches, and just coming back to these 2 GIFs to look for any glaring discrepancies. These riddles were really fun to see getting solved. If you were in the Hollow Knight Discord server whenever Leth teased a riddle, I'm sure you're familiar with how chaotic things would get. I'd also like to formally thank Leth for letting me and other Hollow Knight themed creators participate in the riddles themselves. It was really fun for all of us. And while I'm thanking people, I should also thank all of the people that have been attending some of my live streams lately. If you missed them, I recently did a Steel Soul run from start to finish in one sitting to raise funding towards Campaign 0 for police brutality, and even more recently, I went for the true ending with no charms or upgrades. I'll likely be streaming every other Saturday. It's kind of tentative, it's not too set in stone yet, but that is the plan. So if you'd like to come on and chat or ask me questions or anything like that, then yeah, you know where to find me. Thanks for tuning into The Forge. I'm Rusty, and I will see you in the Citadel. Take care.